Hi everybody, and welcome back to the Shoemaker workshop. I'm Hoshea Allen, and we're going to walk ourselves through tonight an assessment of the 7 major lower Sefirot. You may say, well, what's that? Well, we're going to find out what it is, and in a way we should be able to learn a lot about ourselves in the process. We hear a lot about words like Chesed and Gevurah and Tiferet and so on, and we may have a vague idea what they are. Tonight we're going to learn, hopefully, a lot more about what they are so that we can relate to them on a regular basis. So when we read things, when we read Torah, when we read other material that mentions these particular attributes, we'll have a little better idea of what they're actually talking about. And in the process, we should be able to learn more about who we are ourselves. Tonight is the 10th of Av, so it's actually the day after Tisha B'Av in the year Tafshin Pei Hey, and this is workshop number 53. So you notice we're going to start off with the more well-known Sefirah, which is the first of all of the 7 of the lower Sefirot, and that's called Chesed. Chesed, a lot of people have heard about Chesed, so Chesed is probably the one that most of us know naturally a little bit more about. So what is exactly Chesed? So the normal English word that people use to translate Chesed would be loving kindness. Loving kindness, that's pretty simple. Giving loving kindness. Our notes here say that the essence of Chesed is an expansive outpouring of divine love and generosity sustaining all creation. In other words, Chesed is the root of all creation. The whole world was founded through Chesed. There was a big debate, as it says in the early days before creation really happened, between the Sefirot of Chesed and Gevurah. And Gevurah wanted to be the one that creation was created through, and Chesed wanted to be the one. And in the end, it ended up being Chesed, because with Gevurah by itself, as we're going to learn, there's no room for wiggle room. Because Gevurah is all about being strict and being just strict justice. So we needed to establish the world based, Hashem needed to establish the world based on Chesed or love. So the very, very first of all of these 7 attributes, or midot, is essentially love, which is called Chesed. Now, who in the Torah is the one who most exemplifies Chesed? That would be Avraham. Avraham Avinu is characterized by the midah of Chesed. How do we know so? Well, other than the fact that the pasuk at the end of the Sefer Micha says so, that Hashem gave Chesed to Avraham, we also know by the fact of his life. One of the things that he did is he had this tent where he lived, and he had openings, doorways on all 4 sides of the tent, to the north, to the south, and east, and the west. So no matter where anybody was traveling from or to, they would be able to access Avraham's tent. Why was that important? Because Avraham was involved in Kiruv from the very beginning, and he wanted to bring people close to Hashem. So if people were coming from any direction, whatever, he wanted to make sure that they had direct access to his home, so he could bring them in. Whether they were men, he would take care of them. If they were women, Sarah would take care of them. And through their kindness and their acts of generosity, they would help to bring people closer to the truth, closer to Hashem himself. And remember, back then, paganism was very big, so not a lot of people really knew that there was one creator of all things. We also know that another aspect of Avraham's Chesed was the fact that he himself prayed for just about everybody. That was why he was so good at Kiruv. But another thing, he also prayed for even, quote, the wicked people, because you know the story, right, of Sodom and Gomorrah, that he stood there and he prayed to Hashem that Hashem would spare the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah and the other 3 cities, so no, they wouldn't be destroyed. And they were, quote, wicked people. So this is the act of a person who is rich in Chesed. They don't make a distinction between somebody, quote, worthy of receiving Chesed and somebody not worthy of receiving Chesed. It doesn't make a difference to that person. So what is our call of duty in this regard? So Hashem wants us to imitate himself, right? And all of these Sefirot that we're going to go through, the main call of duty is for us to imitate Hashem. So how? Hashem is generous. He gives with an open heart, right? That is to be, in a sense, made in the image of Hashem, at least in this aspect of being a person filled with Chesed, is to be kind, is to be generous, and is really not to distinguish between somebody worthy to receive Chesed and somebody not worthy of receiving. And that can be problematic, which we're going to get to eventually. But Chesed on its own makes no distinction whatsoever. It's just pure outward giving, total love, and it sees no limitation to that whatsoever. So the avoda, what is the avoda? The avoda is really to give totally freely of our time, freely of our energy, right? Freely of our resources. And we give warmly, we give filled with joy and simcha. That's really what it means. And we don't want or expect anything in return. The minute we think of getting something in return, we've all of a sudden moved away from the attribute of chesed, because that's not a chesed. Chesed is only giving. It's purely an outward force. There's no inward force to it at all. Now, how does this relate to, for example, prayer? How does chesed relate to prayer? Well, somebody who's rich in chesed, what they want in prayer, how they attach to Hashem in prayer, is they're connected to Hashem's compassion. They're connected to Hashem's kindness. They're connected to Hashem's chesed, and they want to imitate that. They're yearning and yearning and yearning for a deep connection, which is love to Hashem. So if you find yourself really feeling tremendous love to Hashem and yearning to Hashem, this is a good indication that one of the main driving forces in your life is chesed. If you feel like you're struggling to like for example, you say to yourself, what do you mean loving Hashem? What does that even mean? How do you love Hashem? Like, if those are questions that you have, okay, maybe chesed is not a natural innate character trait of yours. Maybe that's not the root of your soul. Could be. I mean, I'm not a psychologist nor a mukubal, but just giving you information to help you to understand what these attributes are. So what's the downside of chesed? Chesed, without any kind of boundaries or restrictions, like total unbridled chesed, can lead to, as we said, indulgence, even chaos, and in a sense, permissiveness, that everything is allowed. It's like a kid. You take a kid, you put him into a candy shop, and there's no rules. No rules. Go for it, buddy. And it's just mayhem. You can just imagine that, right? That's unbridled chesed. So yes, chesed is an attribute of Hashem. It's an important aspect of the creation, but in and of itself, it can lead to complete chaos. And there's actually a case in the Torah that talks about, I think, a man having relations with his sister, incest, and that's called chesed. What do you mean that's called chesed? Well, once we understand the idea of what chesed is, this is what we're talking about. Unbridled chesed can lead to indulgence. It can lead to everything being permissible, because I just love you, and so there's no boundaries to that, you see? And that's the downside of chesed in and of itself, or by itself. So what's the take-home lesson for chesed? The take-home lesson for chesed is that every one of our relationships needs to be rooted in selfless giving, i.e. love. We have to love each other, because love is the sustaining force in the entire world. We have to love each other, we have to love Hashem, we have to love His Torah, and so on and so on. So if you want a simple English word for chesed, it's love, or loving kindness. So we've seen now the good and the bad and some of the inner workings of that. Now let's go to the second one. The second one, which is rooted in the left arm, is called Gevurah. Gevurah can be translated here in your notes, say strength or also discipline. Now those are good qualities. To be strong, not physically strong, but spiritually strong, and to be disciplined. It's good to have discipline, self-discipline. So what is the essence of Gevurah? The essence is that there are boundaries. See, chesed says there's no boundaries. And that's why you need an opposite force to chesed, which says, wait a second, there needs to be boundaries. You don't just unleash a 3-year-old child in a candy shop without any kind of limitations, without any kind of rules, without any borders. So you allow them into the candy shop. That's your act of chesed. Let's say that you believe the candy is a good thing for kids and won't make them sick and whatever, won't cause diseases. But I'm not getting into that, which is an analogy. Right? So you allow him into the candy shop, but you say, look, there are rules here. You're only allowed 5 candies. You have to pick one over there, one from over there. You don't get to you completely destroy everything. That's Gevurah, limitations and boundaries. And in a sense, it also encompasses the idea of judgment, or we might say holy restraint, right? Restraint that's rooted in Kedusha. And this is the idea, you might have heard of the word tzimtzum, that there's a constriction. Hashem had to, quote, constrict himself, not physically, but there's an aspect of constriction that from our point of view, we see Hashem as if he, quote, constricted himself because his light is boundless, his light is infinite. So how can he possibly create a world where his light is hidden, Right, so there's this mystical idea of tzimtzum, which is an aspect of Gevurah where he's restricting and creating some kind of boundary where there were no boundaries. This is a very mystical idea and very difficult for us to comprehend on the level of Hashem, but on the level of us, it's much more easy to understand. So that's the idea of boundaries. We need boundaries in life, right? And those boundaries allow us to have precision, to have a certain accuracy in how we deal with life. Who's the Torah model for Gevurah? Obviously Yitzchak. Yitzchak, Abraham's son, is the model, the ultimate model, the quintessential man who was a man of Gevurah. What does that mean? It means, again, he was all about fear, all about yira, not fear in a bad way, not pachad, like, oh, I'm afraid of everything, but he was afraid, of Hashem, yirat Hashem, pachad Yitzchak. That's what Hashem is called. He's called the fear of Yitzchak, because that's an aspect of Gevurah. But he was also very courageous, very self-disciplined. Because why? Because he was willing to put himself on the line. He was willing to allow his father to tie himself, to tie him up and to put him on the Mizbeach, the famous Akedah. So self-sacrifice plays into this, very much so with respect to Gevurah. If you're somebody who just naturally is Moser Nefesh, somebody needs something and you just jump on top of it. You don't even think of yourself. You don't think of it at all. And you just jump into the fray, whatever is needed. That's an aspect of Yitzchak. And it's a very good thing. So the call for us, the spiritual side of this for us, what is our call to action? Our call to action is we have to hold ourselves accountable. So people who are very good at, let's say, cheshbon hanefesh, that when they go into hibodedut, for example, and they really work on themselves, they really analyze what they did in the day, and they're honest with themselves. They say, Hashem, I did this wrong, I did that wrong, I did that wrong, I did this right, I did that, whatever, back and forth. That person who can do that, who can assess themselves very well, that's an aspect of Gevurah. Because what they're doing is they're looking at their boundaries. And that's really what it is. They're holding themselves accountable. And that's the complete opposite of Chesed. Chesed, there's no accountability. It's a free-for-all. So when there's borders, when there's limitations, that's accountability. And that's the aspect of yira, of awe, of fear. And it means that you pull back your ego. You pull back on your ego. Think about Yitzchak. Did he have ego? It's like, he said to his father, make sure you tie me so tight that I don't accidentally jerk and then cause the knife to be blemished. And then the whole thing becomes puzzle. The whole sacrifice becomes null and void. It's like, wow. Okay, that's this aspect of no ego. Now, you're going to see some of these ideas, they're going to sort of weave between the different Sefirot to a certain extent. But so far, we're holding to these two main ones, and they're really the pillars upon which everything else kind of devolves. Now, how does this relate to our avoda, in a day-to-day life? It means that we have to create healthy boundaries in our lives, right? This is the opposite of the permissive parent who lets his kids do whatever they want to do, because maybe when they were kids, that's what maybe their parents were super strict. And so now they're going to just, how it is, right? People bounce to the opposite direction. So they're going to say, well, I'm not going to be strict at all. So what they do is they don't have boundaries for the kids. This is not good. Children need to have boundaries. We need to have boundaries. The whole Torah is all about boundaries, right? This is permissive. This is not permissive. This is Tahor. This is Tameh. It's all about boundaries and defining those boundaries. That's an aspect of Gevurah. We see it everywhere. So we have to weigh our actions. We need to think about what we're doing, right? And just focus on serving Hashem, right? Without all this dross that sometimes gets attached to things. And now let's look at prayer. How does Gevurah play into prayer? How does it play into prayer? Well, it plays into prayer because somebody who is focused on being able to assess his own boundaries is somebody who would normally be more brokenhearted than other people. Because this person is used to looking at themselves and seeing their own flaws and their own sins. And as a result, they'll have a tendency to be more brokenhearted. So in prayer, noticing that maybe you are brokenhearted is an indication that there's a certain humility there, that you see yourself before Hashem and you just feel, oh, I'm so terrible. Again, we're not talking about it in a negative way, that you beat yourself up and all that kind of stuff. You guys understand the subtleties here. But the point is a broken heart. David HaMelech talks about the importance of having a broken heart. And Hashem is close to people who have a broken heart. Read it in Tehillim 51. So it's a wonderful attribute. That broken heart is connected to Gevurah. Now, what's the negative side? What happens if Gevurah goes unchecked? Like, there are no boundaries all of a sudden. You go like, you crazy Gevurah. Well, you can just imagine. It's going to lead to super strictness, harshness, judgment, potential coldness in the presence of other people, a lack of love, and alienation. Right? That's how bad Gevurah can get when it's unchecked. Every single one of these midot, when unchecked and there's no boundaries to it, leads to a really, really serious problem. So we don't want unchecked Chesed, and we don't want unchecked Gevurah. We want them both within boundaries, and that's why the two of them have to go together, which we're going to get to in a second. So what's the lesson of us for Gevurah? And by the way, we all have to develop all of these. We're not saying that, oh, I'm just Chesed, I'm not going to go with the other 6. We're saying that every soul is rooted in one of these. That means that there's a fundamental strength in that person in one of these Sefirot. And as we've seen, Avram is strong in Hesed. It doesn't mean that Avram didn't have Gevurah. It doesn't mean that Avram didn't have Tiferet, and so on and so on. Same thing with Yitzhak. Just because he was the quintessential man of Gevurah, that doesn't mean that he didn't have Chesed. Of course he did. But his main essence was Gevurah. That's what we're talking about. So the lesson that we have to take home from the idea of Gevurah is what? That true strength is not muscular. True strength is not dominating other people, but dominating oneself, mastering the self, controlling the self, the courage to control ourselves, to put limits on ourselves, and not just, have a free-for-all and do whatever we want. All right, now we're going to move to the third one. Now, Tiferet, if you look at it from the point of view of the human body's perspective is concerned, is the chest. Okay, it's the middle of the body. It's the torso, as we call it. So that means that Tiferet is therefore a combination. It's not a balance. Some people say it's a balance between Chesed and Gevurah. Not really a balance. It's an integration of the two. It's an integration of Chesed and Gevurah. That's what Tiferet really is. And it's where the heart, by the way, is. Your heart is there in your torso because you need that in order to have the attribute of Tiferet. If you find that you don't have much of a heart and you're having a difficult time bringing down Torah from your head into your heart, that's not a great, well, one, it's not great. Number two, it's probably telling you you're probably not rooted in Tiferet. Because somebody who is rooted in Tiferet will be able to bring down Torah from the head and to be a much more head-heart connection. Why? Because the heart is that's where it is. It's inside of Tiferet. So heart is Tiferet. Now let's go through Tiferet a little bit more carefully. What is its essence? As we said, it's harmonizing or integrating Chesed, which is the love, and Gevurah, which is the restraint. One is outward, one is inward. You might say one is black and one is white. So it's not that Tiferet is gray. It's the fact that now you use black and white to make a painting. That's what it means. There's not gray. Gray is boring. But you have black and you have white together, and now you have a really nice, interesting painting or a nice drawing to look at. That's the idea of Tiferet. The idea that we say that it's not a blending. Blending would be gray. Gray is boring. But the fact that you still have black and you still have white, that tells us that it's integrating and it's harmonizing two complete opposites. Now that's a very bizarre idea because we don't normally live in a world where we think of opposites being harmonized together. But really that's what harmony means. Harmony means opposites blending together into a whole new that didn't exist before. It's like having a tuba play with a flute. Now a tuba and a flute, you don't normally think they're going to go together, or somebody smashing cymbals together, next to somebody trying to play a little violin. It's like, it's this noise. But if you put them in an orchestra and they all have their part to play, then all of a sudden that cymbal crash and that tuba and that flute and that violin all seem to work in harmony together, and you don't notice any clashes anymore. That's Tiferet. So Tiferet is therefore all about people who are into beauty. The Greeks were into beauty. If you find yourself pulled to that idea, I just like things that are aesthetically pleasing. It just Or you may say, I could care less. I don't care how ugly things look. It doesn't bother me at all how ugly things look. I'm not into that. So people who are into art and into beauty, obviously in a good way, and into having things nice, quality stuff in their home, for example, that they can afford, that's an aspect of Tiferet. And it's also where truth resides. One of the big things about Yaakov, now Yaakov is the Torah model of Tiferet. We find that also from the pasuk in the end of Micha that talks about Avraham being Chesed. It also says that Hashem gave to Yaakov the attribute of Emet, or truth. I think it's the very last pasuk in Micha. So what is truth? Torah is truth. So Torah is rooted in the torso. It's rooted in Tiferet. So Torah is rooted there. Truth is rooted there. That's Tiferet. So you got all those T's, right? You got Tiferet, you got truth, and you got Torah. And that's Yaakov Avinu. He was the Ish Tam. He was the person that sat, right, in the tents of Shem and Aver and studied Torah. That's that simplicity of just loving the Torah. And loving comes from the heart as well, because that's where it has to be. The heart has to be there. So it's the Chesed coming in on the right, and it's the Gevurah over here coming in from the left, and it's integrating them both into a whole heart. So what is the call that we need in our lives if we're going to try to enable Tiferet in our life and to make it grow? We are called to integrate opposites. That's what our calling is, and that's not an easy thing to do at all. Like I said, a lot of people have a difficulty with that. They say, "No, don't confuse me. Don't tell me to integrate opposites. They don't go together." But yes, they do go together. And so people who thrive on integrating opposites typically tells them that, you got probably a strength here in Tiferet. If you find it difficult to integrate opposites, then it's probably a bit of a weakness for you. You may also find yourself learning Torah difficult. Because what is Torah all about? It's learning how to integrate opposites. So-and-so says this, so-and-so says this, and they seem to be they seem to be at odds with each other, right? Until finally you have this integration. You need those two. Beit Shammai says such and such, Beit Hillel says such and such. They seem like opposites, but they have to be integrated into a solution. That's Tiferet. That's the integration of opposites. And one needs discernment for that. Another word we sometimes use to describe Tiferet, besides truth and beauty and harmony, is rachamim, mercy, compassion. Because really, think about it. Chesed is just all loving. Do whatever, buddy, do whatever. Here. You just give. And Gevurah is just the opposite. It's all restraint. Don't do. So when you have the two together, you have now the room for chesed, for compassion. Why? Because compassion acknowledges the two. Compassion says, you really deserve, right? And then fill in the blank. That's Gevurah. That's the judgment side. That's the border side that you violated, the borders. But, we're gonna be kind here. We're gonna show you some chesed. We're gonna be lenient. We're gonna let you off the hook this time. That's called mercy or compassion. And that's the integration of the two, Chesed and Gevurah. Therefore, that's also Tiferet. You see, once you understand what these things are, you can begin to understand in a more holistic way how they actually play out in the day-to-day world. So our avoda is therefore to seek truth. Right? If we're to have an avoda of Tiferet, it's to seek truth. And that means sometimes that we're going to have to deal with paradoxes. We're going to have to deal with opposites that don't look like they want to kind of go together. We might have to grapple with that a little bit. There may be a bit of a struggle on that. How do these things fit together? It's like trying to do a puzzle, and it looks like the pieces don't go together. No, they go together. You just got to figure it out. You need to take those Shem, help me to integrate these things, because it's not a simple thing. All right, how does it play out in prayer? How does Tiferet play out in prayer? So somebody who is rooted in Tiferet, he approaches Hashem and he fuses sincerity and structure, right? The sincerity comes from his chesed, because he just loves Hashem. But remember, love by itself can be a bit chaotic. So if your prayers are just, oh Hashem, I just love you, and it's kind of chaotic, there's no boundaries, right? That's chesed. But you have to have boundaries to this love. That's Tiferet. So if you approach Hashem with love and yearning, but you also know that there's structure. Structure means Gevurah. I created structure. That's the boundaries. So if the two are together and you can think about how you pray, and that's really important to you, that there's love and compassion and yearning, but yet there's structure, that's Tiferet. That's what it is. Now, what's the bad side of Tiferet? You might say there's no bad side. It is all good. If I'm integrating two opposites, it should all be good. But there is a downside. What's the downside to unbridled or unchecked Tiferet? What happens is that person can become indecisive. Why? Well, because he has to integrate this and this. He needs the two opposites. He needs, quote, the data. Give me all the data. I need to see the pros and the cons, right? And he's weighing the pros and the cons, and he keeps on weighing the pros and the cons, and tomorrow he keeps weighing the pros and the cons, and the day after he keeps weighing the pros and the cons, and he can never kind of come to a decision. That's unbridled Tiferet, and that's not good. So you can see how that would play out. So indecision. And also a negative side to Tiferet could be to be compromised that's not valid compromise, right? When you just want to compromise for the sake of compromising. And that's also not a really good aspect as well. And therefore you can lead, if you're not careful, to throwing out truth or sacrificing truth, just the opposite of what Tiferet stands for. You could flip it, right? And therefore you could actually compromise on truth in order just to find out a way to integrate these things. Because you kind of get fed up after a while. And you just say, I don't know how to do this, so let's just shave off a little bit of here, we'll shave off a little bit there, and we'll figure out how to get it, and we'll just make it, that's good enough. So you have to be careful about that. You have to be on guard that you don't slip into that. And the take-home lesson for Tiferet is true beauty, which is Tiferet, beauty. True beauty is not what the Greeks thought, right? It's not in the body beautiful. But true beauty is finding integration. And this is where the word, by the way, integrity comes from. You ever thought about that? What is integrity? What does it mean that somebody has integrity? It's the same word as integration. It means that he's found a way to integrate opposites. That's called integrity. And if he stands by that, that's a tremendous, tremendous level and a tremendous achievement in his life. All right, let's go to the next one now. So what is Netzach? Netzach, by the way, first of all, corresponds to the right leg or the right foot. What is the essence of Netzach? First of all, the word means endurance. It can also mean everlasting, like eternity. And it can also mean victory, to be a champion. So the essence of Netzach is somebody who is persistent, who has drive, who has ambition, and all he wants to do is win. Like Trump, right? Trump is all about persistence and ambition and just being victorious. That's basically Trump in a nutshell. And it's not bad, because who was the ultimate Torah example of Netzach? Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu was all about Netzach. What did he do? He just kept on leading Bnei Yisrael year after year after year through all the complaints, and he never surrendered. He never gave up. He never allowed himself to fall into Yeush, right? Despair. He just kept on going. That's persistence. That's holy persistence. That's Netzach, and that's a great, great quality to have. Of course, you can have it on the negative side, which we're going to get to in a second. But in and of itself, it's a tremendous strength to be able to keep going in the face of all kinds of opposition. That's Netzach. Until you finally win, until you finally are victorious, that's Netzach. So what is the call? What is our call? Our call is to just be persistent all the time. Never give up, never give up, never give up. And this comes out to our avoda, because what is it all about? In other words, people who aspire to leadership are typically people who are strong in Netzach. It often works that way. Because why? Because what are they? Because what are they? They have ambition. The people who climb the corporate ladder, many of them are all about Netzach. They want to get up to they want to be the CEO. I want to be in charge. Now, on a spiritual level, it's important. On a physical level, who cares, quite frankly? Right. So in our voda, we have to be taking initiatives. Good, proper initiatives. There's a famous Pirkei Avot that talks about Hillel the Great, he said, you know, when there's no man, when there's nobody around, basically who's leading, and you see the flock is lacking a shepherd, step into the gap. Step into the gap and do what has to be done. That's the aspect of Netzach. It's not wrong. Now, you have to be very careful you're not doing it, you know, with arrogance and so on and so forth, but we're not talking about that yet. We're just talking about the ability to take in it. When you see something that needs to be done, you jump on it and make it happen. So it also means that you're leading courageously, right? And you keep going back to the Torah over and over and over again. You go back to the Torah, you go back to mitzvot, you pray and you pray and you pray and you pray and you never give up. That's what the prayer angle to this whole thing is. Some people say, you know what, I prayed 5 times and shkoyach. You know what? I think this is right. Moshe Rabbeinu prayed 515 times. This is now in Parshat Va'etchanan that we're into this very week. He prayed 515 times, not just 515 random times, 515 different ways, 515 different arguments that he made to Hashem why he should be able to go into Eretz Yisrael. He didn't just say the same thing over and over again, please let me in, please let me in, please let me in, please. No, that's not what it means by he prayed 550 times. 515 times. It means that he came up with 515 highly convincing arguments. That's Netzach. That's Netzach. So let's say, for example, you're trying to get up for Tikkun Chatzot. You're trying to get up in the middle of the night. And you really want to do this. You want to do this avoda. And you just can't do it. You just can't do it. So you know what you do? You just keep praying. And you can't say, I prayed for a whole month. That's nice. Pray for 2 months. I pray for 2 months. That's nice. Pray for 3 months. See, that's Netzach. Netzach doesn't give up. Not until he wins. And these are also the people who become great athletes, by the way. People who become great athletes, when you combine Gevurah and Netzach, oh, man, you got a winning combination to be like a gold medalist in the Olympics. All right. So that's prayer. Now, the bad side of Netzach, or we might say when Netzach goes unchecked, what's its negative consequences? You can become domineering because you want to be in charge. You want to be a leader, right? You want to be the one who's taking the initiative. And if it's done in the wrong way, you can become unnecessarily aggressive, right? And domineering, and maybe even chas v'shalom self-serving. And that's the negative side. That's the bad side. That's the klipa side of Netzach, right? Every one of these has the kedusha side and they have the klipa side. Right? So what's the lesson? The lesson is that true victory is not defeating others. It's not what true victory is. True victory is conquering our inner self. That's true victory. And somebody who's willing to do that no matter what and doesn't give up on conquering his own bad midot, that's Netzach. That's Netzach. All right, let's move on to Hod. Hod, again, these are ones that we don't oftentimes have a good grasp on. So let's make sure we understand. What is Hod? First of all, Hod is on the opposite side of the body. It's on the left side of the body. It's the left leg or the left foot. And obviously you need both feet, right? In order to walk, you got to have Netzach, the right foot, and you got to have Hod, the left foot. And they go back and forth like this in rhythm. You have to have the two of them. But let's just focus on Hod. What does it translate as? The word translate as like splendor or majesty. Also, there's an aspect of humility associated with Hod. There's also humility associated with Netzach as well, because it says that Moshe Rabbeinu, he was the most humble person ever. So clearly there's a humble aspect associated with Netzach. There's also a humble aspect associated with Hod, but they're different aspects of humility. So what is basically the essence of this Sefirah of Hod? It means humility. It means, like the word Hodu Hashem. Hodu Hashem means thanks to Hashem. Let's give thanks to Hashem. So Hod is rooted in gratitude, in thanksgiving. And that means it's rooted in self-surrender. Because people who are willing to surrender, which is just the opposite of Netzach. Do you see this? Netzach says, I will never surrender. I will go and go and go, and I will never give up. And Hod is just the opposite. I will give up. I will surrender. Why would you want to surrender? So let's find out. Who is the quintessential Hod person? It's Moshe's brother, Aaron HaKohen. He's the essence of Hod. And you see the two brothers, Moshe and Aaron, they were the great leaders of Klal Yisrael for 40 years. One was all about drive and perseverance and just going and going and going. And the other one was all about surrender and thanking Hashem. That's why Aaron was the Kohen. Because what does the Kohen do? The Kohen says, I thank Hashem all the time. I'm nothing. I just surrender to Hashem and I do His will. I'm just a simple servant doing the avodah in the Beit HaMikdash. And what was Aaron's great attribute? What did he really do well? It says in Pirkei Avot that Aaron was the person who more than anybody else was able to make peace with people. He was able to take a husband and a wife and find a way to bring them back together again and create shalom bayis. He was able to take some friend and some other friend that used to be friends and now are not friends, and he found a way to bring them back together again. He was willing to, here's the key, he was willing to surrender his own ego in order to make peace. That's what we mean by surrender. And when Aaron HaKohen died, or was niftar, I should say, it says that all Klal Yisrael mourned him deeply. When Moshe Rabbeinu died, it doesn't say that. Yes, Moshe Rabbeinu was the leader, but he wasn't loved the way Aaron, his brother, was loved. Why? Because Aaron was all about surrender. He was all about making peace. That's Aaron HaKohen. So it means to submit, like Islam, right? Islam, they say, is all about this. But really, it's true. There is an aspect of submission to Hashem and also submission to each other. It means being a doormat, sort of. And you might say, oh, it's terrible to be a doormat. No, it's not. Read the very end of Shemona Esrei. Read it. Right after you finish the last bracha of Shalom, read exactly what it says. It says right there, let me be like dirt. Let me be like just the ground that people walk on. That's Hod. That's Hod. So people have this idea that they grew up with. It's not right to be a doormat. Oh, it's terrible. Well, that's the negative, unchecked side of it. But the proper Kedusha side of it is to be a willing doormat, to allow people to walk all over you, to surrender yourself in order to, not because you think yourself a pathetic person, but because you know by doing so you will bring peace to the nation and peace to other people. So the spiritual connection here is to pause, to think, to reflect. What am I doing? And to acknowledge Hashem in all of one's ways. To acknowledge Hashem in all of one's ways. That's Hod. That means thank you, Hashem. That means thank you, Hashem. So when we thank Hashem, if we find that that's all we ever do, we're always saying, oh, thank you, Hashem. Thank you for Hashem. That's an aspect of humility because you realize that Hashem is giving us everything and I didn't do anything. Thank you, Hashem. Thank you, Hashem. You know, the famous song. So that's what it is. People who sing that song and just naturally sing that song, that's an aspect of Hod. Hodu Lashem, ki tov, ki li'olam chasdo. So that's the avoda, which is to be grateful, and that's prayer, which is therefore a person who is rich in Hod. His prayer is going to be almost all about thanking Hashem. That's what he's going to be doing. He's going to spend his entire time thanking Hashem. Whereas somebody else, like somebody who's all about Netzach, he's going to spend his hour. Maybe he might thank Hashem for 5 minutes. But the person who's all about Hod, he's going to go on for 15 minutes about thanking. I thank you for this. 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 It's natural to the person. Totally natural. Even when we don't understand what's happening to us. When you can thank Hashem for things that seem bad, that seem bizarre, and really feel thanksgiving, wow, you're more than likely rooted in Hod. Now, the negative side we've already alluded to, which is that if not bounded, a person that's overly Hodish we're gonna have a tendency to fall into self-effacement. I'm just a pathetic person. Walk all over me, you know. Who cares? And obviously that's not healthy. And also somebody who would give honor to things that you shouldn't be giving honor to because he just, oh, whatever, yeah, sure, right? No, that's not proper Hod. So the lesson here for Hod is not standing above other people. That's really what it means. It means bowing to Hashem, bowing to other people. right? Letting their will dominate, and you're letting yourself go into the back seat. Let somebody else drive the car, and you're fine with that. Submissiveness and surrender. And you need them both. You need them both. It's kind of bizarre. You might think, I could be Netzach and hold both. Yeah, we have to be able to cultivate both, because at different times in life, we have to be able to maneuver both. You can't walk forward unless you have two legs. Well, I mean, most people, when you get a wheelchair, but you know what I mean. You have to have the right leg and the left leg, and they have to both move forward. One goes up, the other one, then it's the other one's turn. That's how you move forward in life. You know, you move forward in life because you have Netzach and Hod working together in harmony with each other. Now let's talk about Yesod. Yesod corresponds to the male sexual organ, but it's way more than that. So first of all, what exactly does the word mean? The word means foundation. That's all the word means, the foundation. But on a very deep spiritual level, it means that the entire foundation of all of Torah is in Yesod. It's the foundation for everything. Without a functioning Yesod, without that sphere and the energy of that sphere, the light of that sphere in our lives, everything collapses. It's the foundation that holds everything else up. So what is it exactly? Yesod is all about connection. See, so far we haven't really talked about connection. We've talked about these things almost kind of somewhat independently of other people. But really now we have to connect to other people in a really deep, intimate way. That's Yesod. Yesod is the channel of connection, just like the male organ is the physical channel of connection. And that's what transmits all this energy from the upper sphere that we've been talking about. That's what transmits it into this world that makes it real. That's important to understand, because these qualities, you can kind of get lost. They're airy-fairy, you know, they're like, ooh, but what makes it real? How do we get it down into the physical, tangible, physical world here? That's what Yesod does. It connects the upper worlds to the lower worlds. And the ultimate model of the Yesod, of course, was Yosef Tzaddik. We all know that, right? The Tzaddik is the Yesod, the foundation of the entire world. That's what it means. Everything is transmitted through the Tzaddik. That's why we call him the Tzaddik. Why? So when we speak of the Tzaddik, we're speaking about the Sefirot of Yesod, who the ultimate one was Yosef. And how did he do what he did? He did what he did because he basically connected the spirituality of Hashem in the midst of a polluted Egypt, which is astonishing. And through that, he was able to link Parnasa and Shefa and Bracha to his family and eventually to all of Mitzrayim. He brought down the heavenly Shefa and spread it out into the entire world. That's essentially Yesod in a nutshell. And how does one attain that? Well, first of all, it's also in the middle, so one also has to integrate. So it's similar to Tiferet in the sense that it must also integrate, right? But from the point of view of an avoda, it means that we need to be holy in our thoughts, holy in our actions, and pure in the way that we conduct, I'll be blunt, our sexual part of our life. It has to be absolutely pure. And by being absolutely pure, and that's also going to the eyes and to the hands and to the male member as well as to the female, her aspect of modesty and all that stuff, it's all connected to Yesod. That's where we really exemplify. That's where we bring the light of Yesod into the world, through that kind of kedusha, through that kind of purity. Okay, now, so therefore, when we think about connecting to Hashem, that's Yesod. When we think about connecting to our wives or our husbands, that's Yesod. When we think about connecting to the tzaddikim, that's Yesod. That's all an aspect of Yesod, which is always about making connections. So therefore, if you find yourself in prayer, somebody who all you really do is, all you want is deep connections with Hashem in prayer. Like say, when you do hitbodedut, it's like it's deep, and it's all about just connect, devekus, real devekus. Like all you want to do is just connect to Hashem, and that's it, nothing else. Just connect to Hashem. That's Yesod. And the only way to achieve that is, like we said, is the purity of our brit, right? Which is in the exact same place and has the exact same meaning. Now, unchecked, Yesod can be problematic, because what is it about? It's about connecting, but connecting in kedusha. So when Yesod goes unbridled, Somebody may be wanting to connect not to Kedusha. Somebody may be wanting to connect to Nida women, or might be wanting to connect to Goyish women, or worse, to harlots and so forth and so on. That's also connection. That's also through Yesod. And that's terrible. So that's one negative side to Yesod. The other negative side to Yesod is the fact that since it's all about connecting, the other negative aspect of it is a tendency for codependency. I need somebody. No, that's not true Yesod connection. True Yesod connection isn't I need somebody, I'm dependent upon somebody. That's not valid. That is a deformed perversion of Yesod. And also, like we talked about already, the misuse of intimacy is also a unchecked aspect of Yesod. So the take-home lesson for Yesod is that our spiritual life must not remain abstract, meaning all of those 5 Sefirot above it, right? Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, and Yesod. They can we can sometimes feel they're just, they're so abstract, they're so ethereal, they're so lofty. It has to be brought down into the real world. That's what Yesod is able to do. So we have to make our spiritual life concrete. It must flow from the upper world into this lower world. And that leads us to Malchut, the last of all of them. Malchut is a very unusual sphere, and it's basically, what does it, Malchut means kingship. It means kingship. So what does it mean? What is the light of Malchut? The answer is, there is no light in Malchut. That's its light. Malchut is like the moon. It has absolutely no inherent light to it at all. All it can do is, if it's formed, it can be a kli, and that's what we need to do. We need to become this kli, called the kli of Malchut, which all it does is receive. So the ultimate, in the physical, biological, human world, is the whole woman. The whole woman is essentially the sphere of Malchut. And all of the 6 that we've talked about so far are, in a sense, holistically, all the aspect of the male. And they have to come together. There is a giver, which is all those 6, and then there's the receiver, which is Malchut. So Malchut can only receive what comes through Yesod. That's it. Everything else, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, and Yesod, all get funneled down into Yesod, and from Yesod, connecting to Malchut. That's it. No other way to get down to Malchut except through Yesod. So ultimately, who is this person in all of the Torah who is the exemplar of Yesod? Of Malchut? It's David HaMelech. It's King David. That's who it is. He's essentially all about being nothing, having complete bittul, having no ego, total, complete emptiness of himself. We've talked about this many times before. This is the essence of the kli called David HaMelech. He was nothing. He says, I'm nothing. I'm less than a worm. That's Malchut. So obviously there's tremendous humility in that as well. So we see humility in many of these different aspects. But what's the call? Our call is to become a vessel for Hashem. A vessel for Hashem's will. A vessel to set aside ego so we can receive Hashem's kingship in our life. That's Rosh Hashanah. That's all that Rosh Hashanah is all about. So the avoda in a practical way is to bring Malchut into the world, is to turn all these nice spiritual lofty ideas into action. And this is really, quite frankly, what a woman does. A woman is very good at this. I should say even a mother is very good at this. Because what do? They build a home. That's all about concrete actions in this world. That's the essence of Malchut. The creating sovereignty or kingship or rulership in the family. That's an aspect of building. When we build, it's an aspect of Malchut. Of course, there's other aspects of building as well. Building a building, right? Building communities, right? Building a shul. Those are all aspects of Malchut. They're all aspects of bringing all these great spiritual lights into the real world and building something practical. That's Malchut. So the prayer aspect of Malchut would be therefore yearning for Hashem's kingship. Yearning for the Geula, yearning for the Beit HaMikdash. That would be the essence of the sphere of Malchut. if that's all you can think of from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed, and that's all your prayers are filled with, you're probably rooted in Malchut. Or you've been reading too many, end time blogs. One of the two options. So left unchecked, it can lead to arrogance, because Malchut is all about, kingship. And so a king who's arrogant, that can be problematic. And somebody who misuses authority, that's problematic, right? So we don't want to be having the authority of rulership in order to aggrandize ourselves. That's no good. So humility is the key to making Malchut really functional and healthy. And the lesson would be, therefore, that our highest calling is to become a dwelling place for the Shekhinah. That's really what it is. When we allow ourselves and our marriages and our families and our homes and our communities to become a dwelling place for the Shekhinah, and that's Malchut. And it can only happen when we nullify ourselves, when there's nothing here. Otherwise, there's no room for the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah can only come down when there's nothing. As long as we keep pushing back, then the Shekhinah stays up. When we empty ourselves and there's nothing here to push back on, then the Shekhinah will automatically just flow right down. That's Malchut. So that's the 7. Now, hopefully you've learned something from this. You now have an opportunity to look at these 7 and analyze yourself and think to yourself, because this is an aspect of who you are and who I am. It's good to know a little bit about who we are. We learn what our strengths are. We learn what our weaknesses are. And when we see things in our lives that don't seem to add up quite right, we know, wait a second, that's probably because I'm weak in whatever, sphere X. I need to work on that. So you can take that to Hashem in prayer. Help me to improve on this, etc., right? So the purpose of this is not intellectual knowledge. The purpose of this is to learn about ourselves so that we can improve ourselves, so that we can become a better servant, a better Eved to Hashem. Without Hashem, we'll be all successful. Okay, until next time, have yourselves a great week.